Hello, welcome to the Analyst Inside Cricket with me, Simon Hughes in London.
And me, Simon Mann, at Trent Bridge.
And it's the return of Test cricket today at Trent Bridge. Although to call it Test cricket would be an exaggeration, wouldn't it, Simon? Really, it's more of a help yourself day, if you like, for the England batsmen. It wasn't a day in which they were severely tested, was it?
No, it was a test for Zimbabwe's bowling attack and their fielders to keep going all day. But for England, it was not exactly a stroll, not exactly a canter. I mean, they did a professional job, didn't they? And they did what they needed to do. I mean, I think you can go back to the toss. I don't know what you felt. Look, it was a good pitch. I think everyone looked down and said, "This is a good batting surface." But both captains looked up and they said, "It's overcast. Let's bowl first." I don't know. I'm not sure if that was necessarily the right decision or whether it was quite a cautious decision from Zimbabwe. I think England would have bowled. Well, Ben Stokes said they would have bowled, but that might have been more of an attacking option from England. Really get into Zimbabwe. But for Zimbabwe, I just wonder whether they should have batted first, taken on the decent surface that was offered to them. The problem is now that when they do bat, they are going to be under a tremendous amount of pressure. But what can you do? You can only take down the bowlers that are in front of you, and that's what England did today pretty ruthlessly, to be honest. The other interesting thing, of course, is that the two England players who were under pressure, both got hundreds. And Ben Stokes has said Jacob Bethel was going to come back in. I sort of clarified it a bit today, come back in, but come back into the squad rather than the team. But if you're Zach Crawley and you're Ollie Pope, you're thinking, yeah, hold on a second, I'm under a bit of pressure. What if you're under pressure? What's the best thing you can do? Do exactly what they did today, which is score hundreds.
Totally, absolutely. Actually, Derek Pringle's done a blog today on the day's play on our Crickverse blog, and he's equated the day's play to his memories of being at Cambridge University and playing a county side. And one of the first things that happened when you played for a university against a county side was to basically give them their choice at the toss and basically allow them to bat first. And he described it as a tickle your tummy sort of approach. Although probably Craig Irvin's intentions were not to give England batting practice. That's basically what it turned out to be. It was a bit fill your boots sort of day, wasn't it, for England? And you're right that the pitch was beautiful. I mean, I thought there was just a little bit there to start with, as you'd expect on a first day pitch in a test match. There was just a little bit of extra bounce. And occasionally the ball did something, but the bowlers were just not good enough to exploit it. They weren't consistent enough. And actually, I felt, obviously it was great for Zach Crawley to get the sort of monkey off his back, if you like, and get some runs. But I thought Duckett played superbly. And, I've been a bit critical of Ben Duckett in the past, saying, he won't leave the ball and he just wants to try and play a shot of ball and all that. Actually, I thought today he read the situation really well, because he actually played some good balls with soft hands and, negated the movement, any that there was. And then he just got aggressive on anything that was vaguely offline or off length and punished them. And he was almost clinical, which I never thought I use that word about Duckett, but I thought he batted superbly.
Yeah, I think he's a high pedigree player now in both forms,
Yeah,
both
yeah.
white ball and red ball. We saw him score a superb hundred in the Champions Trophy, against Australia. I mean, he's a real sort of go-to player for England now. He's a real key member of the side. Where there are still with Jacob Bethel around, you feel there might be question marks over Zach Crawley because of his form, Ollie Pope because sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. With someone like Ben Duckett, there feels like a sort of a consistency about the way he plays now. And he's also a really attractive player to watch, isn't he? I mean,
Yeah.
he's an enjoyable batter to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't like to bowl to him, definitely. He's the sort of bowler's nightmare because he's so quick on the pull and the cut. As a short player, he plays the back foot shots brilliantly, but also he drives on the up as well. And two players I sort of remember bowling at that I kind of equate with him was Alvin Calagiran, long time ago, West Indies, same sort of height, diminutive stature, left-hander, very good on the cut and the pull, but also drove you on the up as well. But another player that people might perhaps not immediately compare with Duckett, but actually was quite similar in style in a way, is Aravinda de Silva from Sri Lanka, who pulled a half volley practically. He was so quick on the short ball, but then he could also whip or drive anything slightly over pitch and was very difficult to contain, very wristy as well. And Duckett's got a bit of that, actually. He's so difficult to contain. And you sort of think, oh, I might have a chance if I just pitch it up a bit. But then he gets into the drive beautifully. And funnily enough, I think he's almost a better driver of the ball than Crawley. Crawley, who is much taller, should have a good front foot approach, but actually sometimes looks a little bit speculative in the drive. He unfurled some good ones today. Having said that, he did some princely, regal off drive sort of later in his innings. But actually, Duckett was the guy that got it going, and he just has that lovely flow about his batting, which he's very hard to contain, and he will give bowling attacks a lot more headaches in the future than either Crawley or Pope, I reckon.
Yeah. What do England do from here then, Yoz, do you think? Go 498 for three at the close of play. I mean, it's such a dominant position. I mean, they can almost play it whichever way they want. They could declare overnight. It's a 4-day game, remember. The follow on in a 4-day game is 150, not 200. It isn't a 5-day game. Or they could just go out tomorrow and crash it around for three-quarters of an hour, something like that. Really kind of run the openers ragged as well, the top order ragged. It's horrible, that feeling of just being put under pressure as a fielding side when you just know you're kind of either you're waiting for the declaration or to be bowled out, but it's like almost certainly the declaration in this situation. What you think that's the way to go tomorrow? Just
I
an
think there's
hour
a
of
couple of
power.
things. Yeah, but I think there's a couple of things to say actually. One is that listening to Ben Stokes talking pre-match, he's wants to be dominant. He wants the team to be
Mm.
dominant, which I mean he's always said in the past, but dominant with a bit of nuance and with a bit of smartness. And I think also, that the subplot of what he was saying was that they'll evolve a little bit, and he didn't say this, but it's a sort of tacit admission that I think, say, declaring against Australia at Edgbaston in that first test before the end of the first day was actually a bit disrespectful to the game, to the opposition, to the situation. And actually they've realised that they need to be a bit more not ruthless, but a bit smarter in how they play. And that means with this game, don't disrespect the opposition and go, we'll declare half an hour before the end because we can knock them over twice in 2 days and go and play golf. I think they'll play a slightly tougher game and they'll bat on perhaps till lunch. And another good reason for doing that is Stokes hasn't had any batting, has he, since his injury? He didn't play for Durham, even as a batter, in those sort of 5 or 6 county championship matches, one of which he could have played in. So I think he'll fancy just a little knock. I mean, I know it's not the same as facing Bumrah and Shami in 2 or 3 weeks' time, but it's time in the middle just to get his flow. And I think, as Michael Vaughan was saying on TMS today, actually, I think it's important for Stokes that he gets some consistency in his batting. And the place to start will be tomorrow, where he can actually just get a few under his belt, maybe get a 50. No, don't go mad. Just get a nice bit of rhythm into his batting for the sterner tasks ahead. So in that sense, I think England would be wise to bat on for an hour or two.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I mean, if they bat for an hour, they might well have another 100 runs anyway. So
Yeah, yeah,
600 is probably all you're going to need, isn't it? Really,
sure,
realistically. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying about Ben Stokes. He needs some time in the middle. Michael was also saying today there's a possibility that he might play in one of the England Lions games against
right,
India A. So
okay,
there might be a chance of some batting practice before the India series in one of those games. The other thing I would say, Yoz, and I agree with you, there's a slightly different tone coming out of this England side about the way they approach their cricket. And I didn't see that declaration against Australia as disrespectful to the game. I just think that was part of England's mentality and the way they wanted to play. They wanted to be aggressive and say, right, look, we feel confident. We're going to declare. We're going to have a go at you before the close of play. I just happen to think that tactic was wrong. It's not the right tactic. I think you just, against an Australian team, you get as many runs as you possibly can. Root was there. He was over 100. They were building a partnership for the ninth wicket, and I think it's actually, it seems to me, it's just about England, the way they're talking now, just playing a bit smarter in certain situations. So, for
Yeah,
example,
yeah.
in the Sri Lanka Test match at the end of last summer, playing a bit smarter, not just going, crash bang wallop. Remember, Dan Lawrence was out. So, things like that. Really, I think that is, going to be the fascinating thing coming up this summer. They're just talking a slightly different game to be dominant, but also to be a bit smarter. And I think
Mm.
that's a really good thing. So I'm fascinated to see how that plays out this summer. Whether they're able to, how they show us that. But actually, in this situation, another three-quarters an hours batting tomorrow, is probably going to be enough to do what they need to do in this game. Notwithstanding the fact that Ben Stokes probably needs a little bit of time in the middle.
By the way, the overall score at the end of the day, 498 for three, a run rate of what 5.68, I think was it, and it's just for the statistician, just for the statisticians amongst our listeners, sixth most runs in a day's play in a Test match, and the second most on the first day of a Test match. Only just behind England's performance in that match in was it Lahore, Rawalpindi, when they got over
Rawalpindi.
500 in a day, over 500 a day. So it's the second most runs on the first day of a Test match, 498, and they could have got to 500, but just a couple of things at the end of that day's play foiled them. I was looking up actually the most runs in a day's play ever in a Test match, 588 by England in 1935 against India. They scored 571 for 8 declared, I think, and then put India in just at the end of the day. But that was on the second day of a match. Wally Hammond got 180 and all that. But that was, incidentally, off 142 overs, because that's how many overs they used to bowl in those. God knows what time they started.
No, they just started at 11:30 Oz and finished at 6 o'clock. They just bowled their overs so much quicker in those days. I like you. I mean, you always think, God knows how they managed to do it back in the day, but they did. And the game is just so much slower these days. But not not the scoring rates, not the way England have come up with these scoring rates. I was actually thinking, we can talk about Ollie Pope in a little bit and a bit more about Zach Crawley. I was also thinking just about dominant days Test cricket, and that one in Rawalpindi was one of them. But I think because it felt like such an outlier at the time, it was kind of awe-inspiring. This one just felt, just one side just completely crushing the other. One thing, it kind of reminded me of the type of thing that Australia used to do to England when they were in that really dominant period in the 90s. There was at Lords when they got 650 for 4 declared, or well over a couple of days, and then there was the 300 for no wicket here at Trent Bridge back in you know
Yeah,
mid nineties or late
1989 that
eighties,
was, at
nineteen eighty
1989.
nine.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1980, and then there was another occasion, of course, when NASA put them in Brisbane, and they scored 364 for 2 in a day. So they were the dominant Australia days. It kind of reminded me of that, where you almost felt there was like nothing the fielding or bowling side could do, just to halt the stem of runs, and the batting side were just going to do whatever they liked.
Yeah, and it's a shame because there's some promise, I think, amongst that Zimbabwe bowling attack. I mean, blessing Muzrabani looks, he looks a good bowler. He looks a little bit like an Andy Caddick kind of bowler. Obviously, very tall, gets that bounce, not that quick, but has a nice regular action and gets a little bit of movement. I like the look of him. I mean, it's just, it's easy to say this, but why couldn't he have just got a bit more control? But it's tough as a bowler. If you're not that, this is. I go back to my career, and Mike Brearley saying to me, captain of Middlesex in England, saying to me, why do you bowl 4 good balls in an over and 2 bad ones? And I say, well, I just don't think I'm good enough to bowl 6 good balls and over. You have to be very, very good to be able to bowl 6 balls all on the same spot. Stuart Broad was on commentary today saying, that's what you need to do to build up pressure, not only from one end, but from both ends, ultimately, and force a batter into a mistake. And there just wasn't that pressure, partly because they're just not that good. And maybe with a bit more Test match experience against the better countries, they'll get better. But there was some good potential there. But, they only managed 5 maiden overs in the whole day's play. that was partly due to the excellence of the batting, partly due to the flatness of the pitch, and partly due to the slight inadequacy of the bowling.
Yeah. Rabani, you say no great pace. I mean, he was bowling at 84, 85 miles
Yeah,
an
this is
hour.
good. Yeah, yeah, true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he bowled an absolute beauty towards the end of the day's play as well. A lovely delivery that bounced and left Ollie Pope, a man who scored 160 odd. So there were those balls, but there wasn't that consistency. There were too many full balls, too many short balls, both sides of the wicket. And yes, to emphasise it, it's a very good batting pitch. It actually is a pitch that demands, I think, that you batted first, because I think it's also quite dry. So there might be something for the slower bowlers at the back end of the game, albeit that it is a 4-day game, and there might be some, weather around on Saturday. What about Zach Crawley? I've said a huge amount about him, and what about Ollie Pope as well? I mean, he's the highest scorer today. What is he at the close of play? He's 169 not out.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Crawley obviously looked a little bit hesitant to start with, and he unfurled a couple of drives sort of as innings wore on. I mean, obviously his power is off the way he puts away those short balls, sort of on his waist high. He pulls them off not that short a length powerfully. That's why England like him, and that's why Australia fear him, because he can hit you off your length on a flat pitch. He still doesn't look quite right, going forward. I mean, I would still, as a bowler, fancy trying to get him out, on those fuller lengths, just if you've got a little bit of outswing. Again, the Zimbabwe bowlers weren't quite good enough to exploit that potential weakness. But as his innings wore on, he got into some nice rhythm, and you can see his talent. I just think technically, on a slower pitch against sort of little nibbly seamers, he would still struggle. Pope was, actually his normal self. He was quite sort of slightly frenetic to start with, but brilliant footwork. And I think actually that this pressure on Ollie Pope comes from beyond the team and beyond the squad and beyond the kind of entourage. It comes from us. It comes from the observers and from the press and so on. I don't think he looks as if he feels that much pressure within, because he went out and played his normal game and was purposeful and got to sort of 50, more or less a run a ball. He's on 168, not out from 163 balls. Very fluent. Again, you can see the talent. You just got to hope he doesn't get a sort of tricky ball early on or play a ridiculous shot. But I mean, as you said right at the start, given the circumstances, you can only deliver against what you're fed. And they were fed some pies today. It was sort of cafeteria bowling a little bit, and they helped themselves, very effectively.
Yeah. What do England do in that India series though? Because they clearly like Jacob Bethel, don't they? I mean, and he looks, use that phrase, generational talent. He looks as though he's got, what they want and what is required at this level. I mean, they're going to have to make a ruthless decision, aren't they? They're either going to have to, leave out someone from the top 7, or they're going to say to Jacob Bethel, "I'm sorry, for whatever reason, you were still at the IPL, you didn't play in that Test match." But of course, that will have all been agreed, behind the scenes. It wouldn't have been sort of just left like that. And that's sorry, tough mate, because I'm sure there would have been conversations about his place in the future of this side. But they have got an issue. 18-7 doesn't go, unless, of course, I mean, you can think of certain circumstances in the future. Say, for example, Brisbane day-night pink ball Test match where Bethel, say, could play instead of Bashir, or at
Yeah,
Perth Bethel could play instead of Bashir, and England play 8 batters. It's possible, isn't it?
yeah.
But for the India series, you'd think that you'd want a frontline spinner, and that there is someone who's going to miss out. So what do they do?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. The thing is, I think of the two players, Crawley is the more vulnerable than Pope. I like Pope. I think he's got busy footwork. He makes big hundreds when he gets in. He doesn't let the bowlers settle. He's got a reasonable technique. He sometimes it looks like a cat on hot bricks. Whereas I think Crawley has got technical weaknesses, and a good bit of bowling can still undo him. but he's an opener, and he and Duckett have a really great sort of symbiotic relationship. That today, the running between the wickets was excellent. The way that they just dropped the ball on a good delivery and scurried through for a quick single, rotating the strike, having to bowl at a right-hander and a left-hander, and one very tall and one very short. It's a nightmare for bowlers. So, that partnership does work really well. But from a technical point of view, I feel Crawley is more vulnerable than Pope. It's a difficult one. I like your suggestion that Bethel plays instead of in Bashir and bowls his left arm spin. Get his left arm spin a bit better, and then he's a genuine all rounder and he's straight in. But you are going to need an off spinner at some point, I suppose. So I don't know. I'm not sure actually. I haven't got a proper answer to that. If Bethel could open the batting, I'd have him in instead of Crawley, but those two, Crawley and Duckett, have established a great relationship.
Yeah, and then we also said as well that against perhaps on Australian pitches against the Australian attack, someone like Crawley might be a bit more.
Yeah, but you're thinking
effective.
Too far ahead there, aren't you? I mean,
I know.
We've got five tests against India first, so
that's why. Yeah, and that's why I said they need you need a frontline spinner. Bethel is not; he's a part-time spinner, and Joe Root is kind of a part-time spinner. So can they really fudge it like that? But then, do they have a spinner of sufficient quality that's going to threaten India? But then they have put their eggs in the Shoaib Bashir basket, so presumably that's going to continue. So there's a problem to be sorted out somewhere along the line. But they obviously really like Jacob Bethel. I mean, what often happens in these circumstances is that the issue is sorted for them because someone gets injured. But if that doesn't happen, and you wouldn't, of course, you wouldn't wish that on anybody. You don't want that to happen. From an England perspective, of course. So anyway, a decision is going to have to be made. It's going to have to be quite a tough decision somewhere along the line.
Yeah, it is. And that Crawley and Pope can't do any more than they've done. They've performed on the big stage today against a fairly moderate attack, but they filled their boots. It's been a good day for England, and that's all they can do, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure there'll be an answer to this. Maybe
there's got to be an answer, hasn't there?
Yeah, there has. It's that nightmare of you want to play 12, don't you? And you've got to only pick 11. It's a nice problem to have, though. At least that they've got this one guy that still lacks experience, and so Bethel. But obviously, as you say, they like him. So I don't know the answer to it. Anyway, how's this match going to play out? Do you see it ending on Saturday? Stuart Broad's hoping it will, because not as far as playing Chelsea on Sunday, aren't they? And he wants to see if they get into the Champions League or not.
Yeah, they're playing just across the road on Sunday. So I think 4:00 kickoff. So you could have the bizarre situation where the Test match is going on, and we can hear all the cheers from the ground across the road, and you kind of wonder how many people might turn up for the fourth day here. It just seems odd scheduling, actually. They got a Trent Bridge Test match and a big Premier League game being played at the same time. But look, it's going to be. My hunch is that it'll be quite difficult for Zimbabwe when it's their turn to bat. Even though it's a good pitch, there might be just a bit more in it. There'll probably be a bit more in it for the England bowlers. There'll be a kind of relentlessness there. So tough for Zimbabwe, and of course they'll be facing a huge score as well, and they'll be under pressure, definitely. So you'd imagine that England will go on to win the game, and unless the weather intervenes, there's some talk of rain around on Saturday. But England have done as much as they possibly can today to advance the game, and it's big pressure on Zimbabwe on the second day.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to Sam Cooke getting his first bowl in an England shirt as well. That'll happen sometime tomorrow. We'll be back to report later in the match. And just a reminder as well about our live podcast on the 18th of June in aid of Sid Lawrence and his struggles with MND. 18th of June, Bristol, the Square Club. I'll post the link to tickets for that, which are still available on the show notes for this podcast. And also, again, Derek Pringle's done a nice report of today's play on the Crickverse as well on Substack. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks very much for listening. Goodbye from Trent Bridge.